Welcome to Read Me a Story. It's Miss Tonja again, and today we're going to talk about President's Day, what the president is, where they live, and what they do, and who they might be. So let's have some fun with Fly Guy first, and our story is Fly Guy Presents the White House, and it's by Ted Arnold. A boy had a pet fly named Fly Guy. Fly Guy could say the boy's name. Buzz. Buzz and Fly Guy walked through the gates of the White House. Cool, said Buzz. This is where the President of the United States lives and works. Fly Guy did a loop-the-loop. He was excited. He zoomed ahead of Buzz and he flew inside. The address of the White House is 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and it's located in Washington, D.C., which is the capital of the whole United States. Hundreds of people work at the White House every day. The president is the leader of the United States and the head of our government. The president also represents our country anywhere around the world, and it's the leader of all of the armed forces. The president's wife is called the First Lady. She welcomes guests to the White House for ceremonies and special events. If the president is not married, a friend or a relative may act as the First Lady. Every 4 years, Americans vote in the presidential election. Any American citizen who is 18 or older can vote. A ballot is a list of people who are on your choices to vote. All of the presidents have had their portraits painted. Many presidents still hang in the White House. President Washington chose the location of the country's new capital city. It was named in his honor. There was a contest to design the president's house. In July of 1792, a builder named James Holben won the contest. In 1800, President John Adams and his wife Abigail were the first family to move in, and they lived there for just 5 months. British soldiers set fire to the White House. Oh no! And the president's wife took a painting from the building and saved it. It took 3 years to rebuild the White House. The White House has always been painted white. It takes 570 gallons of paint to cover the outside of the building. When the White House was first built, it was much smaller. In 1902, President Theodore Roosevelt built an office west of the main house, and it was a quiet place for him to work away from his 6 children. That became known as the West Wing. In 1909, President Taft built the Oval Office. Today's Oval Office was built in 1934. The White House has held so many special events. There's an Easter egg roll, which is the largest event, and children are on the lawn pushing hard-boiled eggs with spoons. Each November, the president saves one turkey from becoming Thanksgiving dinner. This is called the turkey pardon. And then he lives the rest of his life on a farm. Today, the White House has 132 rooms and 35 bathrooms. There are 4 floors, a basement, and a sub-basement. There are 412 doors, 147 windows, 27 fireplaces, 8 staircases, and 4 elevators. The White House just isn't a place to work. The president has fun there too. There's a 46-seat movie theater, a bowling alley, a golf putting green, a swimming pool, and a tennis court. Lots of pets have lived in the White House too. More than 100 dogs have lived there. The White House even had alligators. President Hoover's son had 2 pet alligators that liked to crawl around. President Theodore Roosevelt's kids had a pony, bears, a hyena, a pig, a macaw, cats, dogs, snakes, a badger, raccoon rats, kangaroo rats, and flying squirrel, guinea pigs, and more. Wow, that was a whole zoo. Some say the president and his family aren't the only ones who live in the White House. Celebrities visit the White House. Famous singers, and the Pope, Queen Elizabeth, President Jefferson opened the White House to visitors, so now anyone can tour their home free, just like Fly Guy. It was such an honor to visit the president's house, Buzz told Fly Guy. Maybe we could work there one day. Buzz and Fly Guy could not wait for their next field trip. Wow, lots of fun things. The end. We will be up next after our break for our next story. Boom. And we're back, ready for our next story? It's called I Am George Washington. Brad Meltzer is our author. I am George Washington. We know that one of the hardest things in life is, it's being the first. When you're the first to try something new, there's no one to show you how. When I was little, I wasn't the first. I was the fourth of 9 children. When I was really little, I lived in a place called Mount Vernon. It had a huge river running through it, and I explored the backyard and the forest every day. People will tell you that I was a perfect boy. I didn't tell a lie after I chopped down a cherry tree. But like that cherry tree story isn't true, most boys back then were not perfect. They were fishing, riding horses. I was a decent athlete, but nothing spectacular. I was an ordinary kid. I liked books, and I even liked to dance. I was great at it. In school, my favorite subject was math. I was pretty good at writing, but I was always a terrible speller. I remember when I said it's hard to be the first. It's also easier when someone else is showing you how to do things. Like my brother. I loved hearing stories of his adventures, and I knew because of him I wanted to serve in the military like he did. We couldn't afford proper schooling, so my brothers taught me at home. I didn't go to high school or college, but I wanted to learn and build myself. When I turned 15, my mom said it was time to get a job. Since I was good at math, I became a surveyor. It's someone who explores large areas of land and finds new boundaries. There was something special in treading a new path, something beautiful in doing what no one else had ever done. Just being around everybody changed my life. I was able to get work. I watched how other people lived and dressed and how they ate. When I got older, I joined the military. In my first big battle, it was on the British side, fighting against the French and the Native American Indians. At the age of 23, I ran for office to be a member of the House of Virginia legislature. But I lost. That's right, I lost. It didn't stop me, though. I tried again, and the next time I won every re-election at that. Was it easy to be in power? Never. Our side didn't have enough food, clothes, and their side was well fed and ready. Our side didn't have enough trained soldiers. We were farmers and fishermen, and their side was strong and ready. So, how do we figure it out? We were sneakier. We would not give in. Then we finally won. A new government was formed. We wrote our Constitution. And all we needed to do was pick our first president. Someone brave, someone strong, someone trustworthy enough to handle all that power. Guess what? Guess who they chose? Some say it was my most heroic act. Instead of putting myself first, I put first my country and all of my faith in you. In life, there are many ways to lead. You can be a quiet leader, a tough leader, a bold leader. But leadership isn't about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in your charge. When you're in power, always look out for those who put their faith in you. Always make your own road, because sometimes the most important trail is the one no one's ever taken before. When you do those things, you will clear a path that will lead the way for others to do the same. Leadership doesn't come from personality. It comes from courage. Courage to do what's right, to serve others, and to go first. I am George Washington. Today they call me the father of our country. I believe courage is to do what no one has done before. And there he is when he gets older. The end. It's time for a break. I'll see you quick. It's time. We're back. Let's see what our next story is. What is the president's job? It's by Allison Singer. The president of the United States of America is the leader of our country. And being president is a very important job. The person who wins an election becomes president of the United States. The new president must promise to do what is best for the entire country. Do you want to run for president? You need to live in the United States of America for at least 14 years. You must be a citizen of the United States. And you must be at least 35 years old. No kids allowed. The president lives in Washington, D.C. It's the capital of the United States of America. The United States government is also located in Washington, D.C. The city was named after the first president of the United States, George Washington. We just talked about him. There are so many monuments that honor past presidents in Washington, D.C. This is honoring Abraham Lincoln. The president's home is the White House. It's been home to every American president except one. George Washington didn't live in the White House because it was still being built when he was president. The president's family lives at the White House too. It has 132 rooms, so there's lots of space to live, work, and play. The president's main office is in the Oval Office. The president meets with official staff in the cabinet room. Bedrooms for the president's family and guests are all upstairs. A good president tries to do what's right for the American people. The president has to make some very tough decisions. The president often travels on Air Force One, the plane that they use to meet the leaders of the other country. They try to find ways in which we can all live in peace. The president is in charge of all of the armed forces. They help to keep America safe. The president works with Congress to decide on laws for the country. Congress is made up of people that are elected by all 50 states. Being president is hard work, but it's exciting too. There's lots of fun traditions. The president hosts fun events at the White House, such as the 4th of July barbecue. They also give awards, such as the Medal of Freedom, to people who do important things. The president meets many people, and they listen to what they think the country needs. The president also gives lots of speeches. Imagine with the whole country listening to what you're saying. The president works for the American people. They count on the president to do what's right. It's a very, very important job. Would you like to be president of the United States? What would you do for the country? The end. It's time for our next break. Glad to see you back. Our next book is I Am Abraham Lincoln by Brad Metzler. I am Abraham Lincoln. When I was little, even young boys were expected to work on the farm and to hunt animals for food, but I preferred to read. I loved animals. When I was 10 years old, I saw a group of boys playing with some turtles. But as I got close, I realized that they weren't being very nice to the turtle. In that moment, I could have just walked away. But when you're 10 years old, it's hard to do what's right. But I knew someone had to. Let this turtle go, and the boys did. Soon after, I wrote one of my first essays on how hurting animals is wrong. It may not seem like a big deal, but back then most kids didn't know how to write. In fact, Indiana was so new, schools weren't even built yet. I went to school for barely a year total, but that didn't stop me. I practiced writing the alphabet on trees. I even wrote on the dirt of the cornfield. When it came to learning, my best teachers were simply books. I loved books so much, I once walked 6 miles to get one. Seriously. I'd read while my horse was resting and waiting in line at the local store, and one of my favorite positions with my feet up on a tree. Before long, I read every book in the neighborhood, from the Bible to Aesop's Fables to Robinson Crusoe. But one of my favorites was a book about George Washington. I'd even copy my favorite parts on pieces of wood. When I was 22, we moved to Illinois, where I met a group of boys known as the Clary's Grove Boys. We were wrestling around and we were talking about the rules and once that your opponent couldn't break a hold of that wrestle. Within seconds, everybody was around me waiting for me to decide what to do. Was I going to get mad and wrestle? Sometimes the hardest fights don't reveal a winner, but they do reveal your character, especially when you're fighting for something you believe in. Still, not every struggle was a victory. Years later, I saw a group of slaves chained together on a boat. Back then, not all people were free. Just because the color of their skin, they were forced to work without pay. They were treated terribly. I was still thinking about them and sad when I became president. I lost 4 elections before I got the big job. 4! America was facing the Civil War. Soon after, I helped to pass a law that would end slavery in America, and it freed all of those people. We ended the Civil War. As a result, it didn't just bring people together in these United States. We proved that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people would be dedicated to everyone's freedom and justice. In life, strength can take many forms, but there's nothing quite as strong as standing up for someone who needs it. No matter where you're from or how little you are, one thing that can be done, never taken away from you, is your voice. When you find something you believe in, use your voice. And when you see injustice, speak louder than you've ever spoken before. Because when you do, you'll never be forgotten. I am Abraham Lincoln. I will never stop fighting for what's right, and I hope you'll remember that when you speak your mind, speak for others, there's nothing more powerful than being heard. And there he is when he got older. The end. Let's stop for a minute, take a break. We'll be back.
Welcome to Oxford Community Television. We are proud that our 4 communities continue to choose local programming, local news, sports, community issues, familiar faces, celebrations, and commitment to each other. Welcome to Oxford Community Television.
I'm glad to see you back. It's already time for our last story for today. Grace for President by Kelly DiPuccio. One Monday morning in September, Mrs. Barrington rolled out a big poster with all of the president's pictures on it. Grace Campbell could not believe her eyes. Where are the girls? That's a very good question, said Mrs. Barrington. The truth is our country has never had a woman president. No girl president ever? Grace asked. I'm afraid not, said Mrs. Barrington. Grace sat at her desk and stewed. No girls? Who'd ever heard of such a crazy thing? Finally, she raised her hand. Yes, Grace? I've been thinking it over. I'd like to be president. Several students in the class laughed. Well, I think that's a star-spangled idea, Grace, said Mrs. Barrington. In fact, we can have our own election right here at Woodrow Wilson Elementary. The snickering in the room stopped. Grace smiled. Would anyone else like to run for president? Mrs. Barrington asked. Nobody raised their hand. Becoming president was going to be easy, Grace thought. The next day, Mrs. Barrington made an announcement. In the name of democracy, I've invited Mr. Waller's class to join our election. The class has nominated Thomas Cobb to be their presidential candidate. Grace's heart sank. Thomas was the school spelling bee champion. His experiments always took the blue ribbon at the science fair, and he was captain of the soccer team. Being president wasn't going to be as easy as Grace thought. The teachers put the names of all 50 states and the District of Columbia into a hat. Everyone except Grace and Thomas got to choose a state. I'm Texas, said Anthony. I'm New Hampshire, said Rose. I'm Michigan, said Robbie. What does the number 17 mean? Each state is assigned a number of electoral votes. That number is determined by how many people live in that state, said Mrs. Barrington. Each of you will be representing your state. Altogether, our country has 538 electoral votes, Mr. Waller explained. On election day, the candidates who receive 270 electoral votes win the election. Why 270? Asked Rose. That's more than half. Becoming president really wasn't going to be easy, Grace thought. Grace came up with a campaign slogan. Make history, vote Grace Campbell for president. Thomas came up with his slogan, vote Thomas Cobb, the best man for the job. Grace listened to what issues were important to the students, and she made a list. A peaceful school with no bullies, a cleaner school with no littering, better hot lunches, no more fish stick tacos. Thomas made up his own list of the promises. Free tutoring, free soccer lessons, fish tacos every week. Grace made campaign posters and buttons. Thomas made posters and buttons too. Each week, the teachers set aside time for the candidates to meet with their constituents. Polls were taken, votes were making their choice. Grace continued to campaign. At recess, she gave speeches. During lunch, she handed out free cupcakes. After school, she held rallies. Meanwhile, Thomas wasn't worried. He cleverly calculated that the boys held slightly more electoral votes than the girls. At recess, Thomas studied his spelling words. During lunch, he worked on his latest science experiment. After school, he played soccer. Even before the election, Grace made good on her promise. She joined the safety squad. She organized a school beautification committee, and she volunteered her time in the school cafeteria. In early November, Woodrow Wilson Elementary hosted a special Election Day assembly. Grace and Thomas took their places on stage as the school band began to play. Henry was the first representative who approached the microphone. The Yellowhammer state of Alabama cast its 9 electoral votes for Thomas Cobb. The last frontier state of Alaska cast its 3 electoral votes for the best man for the job, Thomas Cobb. Hannah called out, the Grand Canyon state of Arizona cast its 10 electoral votes for Grace Campbell. And so it went. State after state after state cast their votes. The scoreboard in the gym kept track of the totals. The voting demonstration was quickly coming to an end. Clara approached the podium. The Badger state of Wisconsin cast its 10 votes for my best friend, Grace Campbell. Grace looked at the scoreboard. Thomas had 268 electoral votes. She had 267. There was only one state still unaccounted for. Wyoming. Thomas grinned. Grace felt sick. Sam walked to the microphone. He looked at Thomas. He looked at Grace. He looked down at Grace's handmade flag. Sam didn't say a word. What are you waiting for? Thomas whispered. The band stopped playing. All eyes were on Wyoming. Finally, Sam cleared his throat. The equality state of Wyoming cast its 3 electoral votes for Grace Campbell. The gymnasium erupted in loud cheers and a few boos. Mrs. Barrington approached the podium. With 270 electoral votes, the winner is Grace Campbell. Thomas looked stunned. Grace hugged Sam. Why did you do it? She asked. Sam handed Grace his flag. Because I thought you were the best person for the job. The following week, the students in Mrs. Barrington's class were preparing for their career day presentations. Grace volunteered to go first. She stood at the front of the room, and she glanced at the poster still hanging on the wall. My name is Grace Campbell, and when I grow up, I'm going to be President of the United States. And this time, everyone believed in what she said. And it looks like she does when she grows up. The end. That's our very last story for today. I'll see you next time.